Hello everyone and welcome to TV Talks, the show where I take a look at both the good and the bad of what television has to offer. Today it's the big one, 4Kids TV! Oh, this is gonna get ugly, and not in the way you're thinking. This is gonna get ugly on my part. What do I mean by that? Well, just strap in and see, folks, because oh boy, do we have one today with a very, very big history of weeaboos and otakus and casual anime fans, because there's a huge difference between the two, obviously. And that is not sarcasm, that's actually real. It has a big history of controversy with them. Big, big, big. What is 4Kids, for those who are too young to remember? 4Kids was a company that decided, hey, we're gonna dub anime, and then they got a whole bunch of people that seemed to be the same people in every single anime together, and then dubbed them. And they were pretty successful up until 2006, and then things just fell apart for them. And then also in like the 2010s, people got a hold of the other animes and then found all the changes they made and they got really angry at them. But it wasn't always this way, because prior to 2006 and especially 2010, 4Kids was held in pretty decent regard for most people. Well, let's talk about the history. And as we go along, I'm going to be reviewing it because a lot of the history has to do with the overall quality, because that's a huge part. You can't have one without the other in this case, because the quality and the overall products that they had directly tie into the history. So instead of doing it in two segments, I think it'd be best to do it as we go along. But first, my experience with 4Kids. I was there from the beginning in the FoxBox era. I was right from there. Sonic X was my show. I adored it when I was younger. I'll talk about how I feel about Sonic X eventually, because, well, you can't mention 4Kids or anything about it without mentioning Sonic X. And there was a lot of other shows I watched on there, and I made a video a long time ago when Vortexx was coming to a close, and while I still like that video, I never really felt like I went into enough detail. But now, here's my chance. I'm going to go over the extended history, and I've gone through multiple archives and multiple sites, even reaching out to a few of the people on board. Yeah, I went that far. But now it's time to talk about 4Kids. So, 4Kids obviously started in 2002 with the FoxBox, right? Wrong. Okay, so then it started in 1997 when Pokemon was a thing, right? Wrong. Started off in the year 1970. Oh yeah, 4Kids goes way back. It was just a licensing company and advertisement company for things like Nintendo or Thundercats. It was just kind of here and there, random odd jobs, but they never really achieved any notoriety. Until a certain anime came out about a bunch of little monsters that would be captured by humans and then would forced to be battled with, you know, as we all know, that's fighting foodons. No, it's Pokemon! You know, you teach me and I teach you, Pokemon, gotta catch them all. Pokemon was huge in the 90s. Huge, huge, huge. You couldn't walk outside of your house without being just bombarded with all things Pokemon. And so naturally, that had to be an extreme success for whoever owned it. Who owned it? Well, obviously Nintendo, but the distributors of the English dub and creators of the English dub were 4Kids Entertainment, as they were now called. Because they decided that they were going to throw their hat into the ring when it came to television. Specifically, well, anime. But that's not how it started off. Really, it was just Pokemon to start, just to kind of test the waters and see what happened. Overall, though, it kind of seems like they just kind of got lucky that Pokemon was their first. I mean, imagine if they got something kind of unsuccessful, like fighting foodons. Oh, wait. But that's not the one that they started off with first. So, Pokemon was the first show, and instantly, it caught fire. Granted, they did do a lot of substitutions. I'm going to get to that in just a minute, because, well, it's not quite relevant right now, but the point is, Pokemon was huge, whether it be because of the games or the card games effect, or just that people really liked the show, or both. Whatever it was, they were making bank off of Pokemon, so what did they do? They decided to cash in on another show and do the same thing for that one, Yu-Gi-Oh! While not nearly as popular as Pokemon, this still got them a huge profit. And they were really optimistic and really excited, so they decided, hey, let's acquire a bunch of other normally family-friendly shows and see if we can bring them over here, because think about it. Except for maybe Toonami and Dragon Ball Z, anime was not very big over here. A lot of people didn't really have the resources to get it, and a lot of people really didn't watch it very much. It's not like today where it's a huge mainstream hipster thing. It depends on where you go. But it wasn't like that back then, so 4Kids doing this was actually kind of a big thing. And so they decided to pick up a few licenses here and there, things like Kirby Right Back At Ya and Fighting Foodons. Yes, I've already made 2 Fighting Foodons jokes and now I have to actually talk about it. And I will. Trust me. I know I'm jumping the gun a little, but this is going to be a long one. A very long one, because there's so much to talk about and so much history to cover. So, they were all ready to get going on the distribution of DVDs and stuff, and maybe finding a syndication package or a deal with Kids WB like they had with their other properties. But then, a little known network got a hold of them, and that was called Fox. You see, Fox was having some big problems with their Saturday morning block Fox Kids. Their ratings were in the toilet. They had no idea what to do, and nothing they were bringing on board was fixing it. So they decided to make a deal with 4Kids in 2001 to make their own Saturday morning block to replace the failing Fox Kids. And that's exactly what they did. So in September of 2002, we got the FoxBox, the first incarnation of 4Kids TV, and so far, the least controversial. I say so far because their future is so shaky that everything seems to get frowned on, but FoxBox was a big hit, and also, even the people that really hate 4Kids admit that FoxBox at worst was okay. For me though, this was what I was exposed to a lot, this and 4Kids TV, but yeah. So, FoxBox. What was FoxBox? Obviously it's just a bunch of anime dubs, right? Wrong, actually. FoxBox was a legitimate Saturday morning program thing at first. See, what they wanted to do was not only use a lot of their anime dubs to expand their schedule, but they also decided to take in new shows that weren't on Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon or, I don't know, the Food Network. Not like they have a Saturday morning cartoon block though, that'd be terrible if they did. But they had other shows that no other channel had, like Funky Cops, Stargate Infinity, or of course, the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show, you know, the one from the 2000s, not the new one on Nickelodeon. It's confusing. But yeah, they had stuff that was not anime dubs, and specifically that people there made or produced. So they had a half and half. They had half anime dubs like Kirby or Ultimate Muscle, and they also had some new stuff, like I said, Funky Cops, Stargate Infinity, or TMNT. Stargate Infinity was the first show to air on this block, and it did okay. The ratings were pretty darn high at first, but eventually they kind of went really, really far down for many reasons. One, Stargate Infinity was just kind of an okay show. At first, the intrigue was like really, really hype, and it was, yeah, this, like I said, it just basically amounted to hype. But then people were just kind of towards it, and then towards the end of the line, more and more shows that seemed a lot flashier and more important and cooler came around, and then no one stuck around to watch that. Then was Ultraman Tiga, which was not really their show. It was an acquired Japanese show, which they dubbed, which is the only live action show to air on the FoxBox. And it was pretty cheesy, it was pretty campy, but it was pretty harmless. Then there was Kirby Right Back At Ya. Kirby Right Back At Ya was pretty good. I really liked it as a kid, and I still like some of it now, although the later episodes do get a little, the first couple are just kind of weird. But here's the pattern. Whenever they try to do something related to the games or just kind of fun and exciting, it's good. Whenever they try to teach you a lesson, it's terrible. Except for the cartoon one, because the one where they make the cartoon, that's the best episode. It's so funny. And then they had things like Ultimate Muscle and Fighting Foodons. Fighting Foodons was the least popular in the premiere lineup. Nobody really stuck around to watch it. Nobody really cared about it because it was just kind of, how do I put this, stupid. It's basically Yu-Gi-Oh! Mixed with food. Basically, people make food, and then they put magic cards on it, and then it brings them to life, and then they become monsters, and then they fight each other. Doesn't that just sound riveting? But they tried to promote it. They promoted it a lot, because one thing I'll give FoxBox credit for that a lot of networks don't do today and didn't do then is they promote failing shows. They'll give successful shows promotion, but they will still heavily promote bad ones like Stargate Infinity or Fighting Foodons. When they had really low ratings, they decided to pump them up and they tried to give them more attention. It worked for Fighting Foodons, mostly because they had the episodes dubbed already and they couldn't just stop at mid-season at the time. And it worked a little bit for there, but Stargate Infinity just didn't work for them. So, before we get to the rest of the content, how was FoxBox as a network? You can tell they really wanted to make sure that this stuck in people's minds and that they really wanted it to be around for a long time. In fact, one of its mottos was changing the face of television forever, which it kind of did by, you know, getting people's attention to anime and that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of creativity behind it. Remember my Nicktoons Network video when I talked about all the creativity and randomness it had? FoxBox was kind of more of a contained version of that. It wasn't as sporadic and random as Nicktoons Network, but it kind of has a similar style. The FoxBox logo would often do a lot of crazy stuff in there, while Mike Pollock, the voice of Eggman, would provide narration. Speaking of that guy, either he's a really good actor or he was just genuinely excited about the block, because he went above and beyond with these narrations and promo stuff. Let me show you a comparison. So spoiler alert, FoxBox eventually changes and becomes 4Kids TV. 4Kids TV has announcements like this. 4Kids TV is always on. It's on the air Saturday mornings on Fox, and it's online on www.4kids.tv. Check it out whenever you want. It almost sounds like kind of Sonic meets Chris McClane. Doesn't sound quite right. But then this guy, it's no wonder why he's considered the best out of the whole cast, right along there with Dan Green. He did stuff like, want to get inside the FoxBox? Well then go to www.foxbox.tv. Yeah, foxbox.tv. Turn your computer into a FoxBox by going on to www.foxbox.tv.now. He was revved up, he was excited, and you can tell that this was going to be kind of a passion project when it came over to the first ever opening title for FoxBox. I'm not talking about whenever it came on the air. I'm talking about the very first time FoxBox was ever on the air. So there was Fox's regular programming, and if you ever want to see this, by the way, it's look it up on YouTube. It's called A Step in Time FoxBox. It takes like a minute to get started, but it's really good. It's the first like bumpers and stuff from the original air date. So first of all, when you're gonna just start a network, or a block or whatever, sometimes it'll just appear. Maybe there'll be something like that, or maybe there'll be a little bit of whispers here and there. But one, it was heavily promoted beforehand when Fox Kids was changing, you know, to give people a heads up. That's always good to let people know when change is coming so they can get their rage out of the way. Second of all, and this is the big one, is they tried to rev you up too the first time it was going. All they needed to do was say, and now from the producers of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, it's the FoxBox. But, and just kind of go along with those kind of, I don't know, cymbal crash and whatever it was. It was really ambient and stuff, and the sound effects really helped. But this guy, he really put his all into it. And now, from the creators of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, it's the FoxBox! Like that. He really tried to get you excited, and he really did. And also, FoxBox had a soundtrack. That's right, it had a soundtrack for its bumpers. It had a theme song called What's Inside the FoxBox? And then eventually changed to the FoxBox Rocks. And then they actually released a CD, where they had all of their kind of interstitial music, because they actually did have different soundtracks and different songs for when there was a season finale coming, or when there was a new episode or a series premiere. It would always be different. They'd always vary it up. So the FoxBox itself, like the people behind it, you can tell they cared about it. But how was the programming? This is gonna take some explaining. Okay, so one of the things, I can't get around this anymore, one of the big infamous things that 4Kids has is taking anime and then editing it to make it more appropriate for kids and Western audiences. What do I mean by this? I mean by cutting out a lot of the sex, violence, and all of that, and changing some Japanese foods into American foods. And ladies and gentlemen, please get over it. Okay, don't hurt me. That came out wrong. That came out wrong. I'm not necessarily on their side about this, but I think people are way overreacting to this. Sometimes. sometimes they mess up super badly with a certain anime that's initials are OP that I will get to in a minute, but that one actually has a big interesting backstory to it. But some of the anime like Pokemon or Sonic X, it makes sense why they had to edit it. First of all, similar to Canada, you can get away with a lot more on a children's cartoon than you can in America. And like in Japan, from what I've heard from some of my Japanese friends, you can swear a little bit, you can have sex stuff, and alcohol even, and guns, and the violence is way more. Man, Japan must be a terrible country. I'm kidding. But one of the things is you can't get away with that on American TV for kids, especially back then, especially back in that tumultuous time of the early 21st century in America. Because, well, for like the next couple of years, people were really shaky on that kind of stuff. But ultimately, yeah, some of the stuff kind of had to change. Like, the guns were turned into fingers, which is kind of weird. Basically, it kind of amounts to this. It's weird, but I understand where they're coming from. And I get it. This was the only exposure people had to it at the time. So now looking back, they're angry at it. And yes, sometimes it's stupid. Like, they'll remove English text for whatever reason. No matter what text it is, they'll remove it, even if it's in English. And so sometimes people will just be holding up blank signs. That'll send a message. But then there's the thing over like, oh, they swap Japanese food out with American food, like turning a rice ball into a sandwich, or turning in like, I don't know, sushi and wine or something into a cheeseburger and a soda. Yeah, so what? Now, there's a simple term, it's called localization. Now, I understand it's anime, so it's obviously on par with the Bible and can't be touched. I'm kidding. But really, it's not bad. I mean, does a rice ball getting turned into a sandwich really affect the overall show? And I can understand some of the other edits they get that they did with people getting angry at that, but it's just like there for a minute most. Does that really affect it? And people say, oh, it removes Japanese culture. Yeah, so I know, but it's not for a Japanese audience when in this dub, it's for an American audience. Now, I will admit, the way they handle it is stupid, especially because in sometimes it's obviously pasted over. But would I get angry if, say, in SpongeBob, the Japanese dub of that replaced Krabby Patties with ramen or sushi or rice balls even? No, because it wouldn't affect the overall quality of the thing. But what does affect the overall quality is when they decide to heavily edit scenes. Sometimes. So, sometimes there are scenes that seem like 4 kids can actually keep it in. But they decide to remove it for whatever reason. Maybe it's some suggestive stuff. It's really pick and choose here. Sometimes they really mess up, but sometimes they actually do it for legitimate reasons. Now, to clarify, very early on, when 4Kids had these productions and anime dubs, they didn't go all hog wild with it. They weren't so vicious in cutting stuff out and re-putting stuff in. It wasn't that bad. Kirby was ultimately just kind of slightly altered. I'm not sure about Ultimate Muscle because I can't find the Japanese stuff anywhere, and I looked, and I'm probably not looking hard enough. But some stuff they really did. We'll get to that. So, FoxBox started off to be a really big hit. People took notice of the creativity and people liked most of their shows because there was also Fighting Foodhounds in there. So they decided to expand and get more. And then they did it. They finally did it. After getting a couple more shows on board that were decent success, like Cubics, they dropped the bomb. The big one. Oh, the big one that would make FoxBox at the time super huge. Sonic X, the show that stayed on the network till the day it died. Sonic X, which has a huge mixed reception. So, out of a lot of them, this was one of their most edited ones because Sonic X was just generally an overall edgier show for kids. And like I said, in Japan, that's allowed. You're allowed to do stuff like that because they have a lot looser of censorship laws and stuff. I mean, You know, it's just kind of like that. It's not nearly as restrictive as America, so you're allowed to do stuff like that. In America, you can't. So there's a lot of stuff like guns and sex stuff that had to get removed, which is understandable, but some stuff was a little weird that they changed, but I've already covered this ground before. So, Sonic X caught fire. It was huge. And people were loving it, but there were those people who were saying, oh, they changed it too much, even back then. This is one of the points where a couple people started catching on. Not a lot of people, but a couple people here and there started catching on. To which that the FoxBox people, when asked about it, actually said, well, you guys don't know the whole story because it turns out, well, you know, Sega actually asked us to do this. Some people didn't believe it, but actually, turns out that was true. Sega and the people behind the show asked them to kind of Americanize it a bit more and actually make it more acceptable for Western audiences. So yeah, one of the biggest edits that they did actually came from the people who made it asking them to edit it. So, how did it turn out? It's complicated, actually. For kids, it's great. It's got a lot of action, it's got a lot of stuff like that, and the voice acting is decent. But there's like one or two characters that don't sound good. But one of the things that gets people is that they were going to get the people from the adventure games to do it, but then they decided to cop out last minute to save money. This both angers me, and yet I kind of understand it. On one hand, it's angry because, dude, you almost had it. You could have gotten those people and it would have been an even bigger hit. But on the other hand, looking back, the voice acting in that game wasn't that good. And besides, without that, we wouldn't have had Mike Pollock as Eggman now, because he's the best Eggman we've ever had. But listen to some of Eggman or Tails or Knuckles delivering those games, and you'll realize the acting wasn't really the best. But anyway, Sonic X itself. I really want to talk more about Sonic X on a later date, so I'm not going to go into a huge in-depth thing about it right now. All I'll say is, it's decent for what it is. I mean, I'm sure the Japanese one is a bit better, but I kind of have a soft spot for this one because it was my childhood. I loved it so much. It's what got me into Sonic. It's what got me into being obsessed with Sonic Adventure 1, 2, and Sonic Heroes as a kid. This is what made me really, really like Sonic. However, I do acknowledge that there were a bit of edits. Even if they were justified, I can understand how this could break the experience for you. But if you're at all interested in revisiting it or just giving it a shot, just go ahead and try. Just know two things. One, Chris sucks. And two, the last season sucks. I mean, the Metarex stuff was terrible, but that's not 4Kids' fault, and that's not 4Kids related. So 4Kids kept carrying on with the FoxBox broadcast thing. In fact, they were getting so big that they even decided to do a TV movie, sort of, kind of. What they did was fight for the FoxBox, but I already reviewed it, but here is the basic version. So they decided to use a lot of excess stock footage and a little bit of new animation here and there to help tell a story about the FoxBox getting almost taken over by a league of villains who were the villains of their most popular shows. And then the heroes teaming up to fight them. I have a review of it already, so go ahead and check it out if you're interested. But then, in the midst of all this popularity, and in the midst of doing all this right, FoxBox and 4Kids, because they're the same person, or company, or person, it depends on if you want to, I don't know, personify it, but they made a big mistake. One Piece. Oh boy. Right from the moment you saw the trailer, you knew this was a mistake. And it was. Oh my gosh, I'm not a huge anime fan. I mean, I like some. I like a few. It's just not like my big thing, but yeah, it's good. There are a few I do like. But even as a casual person who will watch it here and there, this is the worst dub I've ever seen. They took something that was meant for America's perspective, at least, late teens and early adults. And even adults, actually, because there's a lot of stuff in the Japanese one that is not okay for kids. But unlike stuff like Sonic X or Pokemon, this actually was basically half of the thing. It's about pirates, so there's violence and stuff, and there's sex, and obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff that's not in it for kids. How could 4Kids possibly think of doing it? Easy, because they didn't want to do it. 4Kids never wanted to dub One Piece. I bet you never knew that. Here's the story. Let me take you back to an earlier time, and I'm not going to do that voice. So, FoxBox got a hold of a show called Dinosaur King, and they really wanted to do it. They really wanted to do it because they specialize in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! So now it's kind of similar, so why not do it? However, they were only allowed to do it if they could do One Piece too, because One Piece was big in Japan, so hey, let's bring it over to America. 4Kids took one look at it and said, no, we can't do this. We can't do this. This is a show that's not for our demographic. We can't do it. But they really wanted that Dinosaur King. So, they had no choice. If they wanted a show that badly, they had to do it. They had to take two. They're small. Actually, no, One Piece is not small. It's like everlasting. But yeah, even the people behind the show hated what they were doing. Even 4Kids knew this was a mistake and it was only going to hurt them, and they were right. They were absolutely right. It hurt them so badly. Even people who didn't know about the Japanese one knew this was not One Piece. They knew this was a big, big, big problem. And it cost them a lot of viewers. And in fact, they actually, rumor has it, got the rights to One Piece revoked, and then it got taken over to Funimation, and 4Kids was happy about it because they didn't have to ruin it anymore. That's right, they knew that the writing was terrible. They knew all the edits they were making were terrible. And they knew that that theme song was atrocious. Speaking of the theme songs, one of the things that the company does, especially in the FoxBox era, is make a lot of catchy, upbeat tunes. Some of them good, some of them bad. Some of them, like Mew Mew Power, for instance, or the One Piece rap, are terrible. Ones like the opening theme to Pokemon, Kirby Right Back At Ya, or yes, even the meme itself, Sonic X, are actually really good. Now, a lot of people go back to the FoxBox era and say that the theme songs there were better, and they were right. Because, remember when I said that the FoxBox was huge in creativity and it really wanted to give all these shows a chance, and it did things like Fight for the FoxBox, which kind of reminded me of the city bumpers that Cartoon Network would do, but on a bit of a lower budget. See, it cared about this stuff. It knew what the fans wanted. It even had a lot of sweepstakes and giveaways. Like when it first came on, it had the Watch the FoxBox sweepstakes, where it gave out a whole bunch of Game Boys and a few GameCubes and Super Mario Sunshine and t-shirts, and they were really invested in the audience, and they really wanted to make sure that they had a good time. But then they saw all the money, all that sweet money. So what do? They decided to switch up their TV department. And they decided to get a couple new people on board. Now, it wasn't a big thing, but there were just a couple chair people that were changed. And then they decided to focus on, quote, what really makes revenue. And right there, 4Kids made its big mistake. They got corporate, and it hurt them. So now instead of doing stuff like focusing on creativity and just having a good time, they just decided to take random anime and then dub it inappropriately. And by inappropriately, I mean too appropriate. This is the 4Kids that everyone hates, and I get it. Oh yeah, so the FoxBox era is the one I defend. I defend it when they actually were trying to do good. I defend it when they had no choice but to do the One Piece anime, which they couldn't stand what they were doing. I was standing up for them through all of this, but now, oh, they messed up. So, they changed the brand to 4Kids TV, and all that creativity stuff was gone. It was just a generic channel now, kind of like what Nickelodeon was when it first rebranded, you know, in 2009, when everyone was complaining it was boring and flat. 4Kids was kind of like that. It still had a little bit of creativity here and there, but it started dwindling as the years went on, because when FoxBox changed, so did the network as a whole, and it wasn't just the name, and it wasn't just the bumpers, but the decisions they decided to make both as a network and as a company were entirely different and completely backwards from their original goal. Let me explain. So, I mentioned that they really wanted to be creative and really wanted to be exciting. And they wanted to not just be an anime channel, but they also wanted to have other animations. However, when it became 4Kids TV, the new people and older people who were listening to the newer people's influence really just stopped seeing the big picture. Funky Cops was gone. Stargate Infinity was gone. Those shows weren't very big anyways, but now the only non-anime thing on there was TMNT. And I guess Winx Club, but that was still an acquired show. All their original content was gone. But what wasn't gone were Sonic X and Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically Sonic X. Sonic X, as popular and as loved as a show it was, even with me having a soft spot for it now, became a monster. Every network has their monster. For Disney Channel, it was Zack and Cody. For Cartoon Network, it's currently Teen Titans Go. For Nickelodeon, it's SpongeBob. Sonic X was 4Kids' monster. The one that just took over all the airtime and crushed all the shows under its feet. But that wasn't the only problem with 4Kids, is that Sonic X had like 3 time slots, and only one of them was a new episode. And they were getting into that terrible Metarex saga. But all their old shows, Kirby, Stargate Infinity, Ultimate Muscle, gone and never seen again. With the occasional Cubix rerun, it was all done. Once the show was done on the network, you never saw it again unless you saw it on YouTube or DVD. Because they didn't care about the old stuff. They just wanted whatever was new, hip, and trendy. So yeah, it was just Sonic, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and whatever flavor of the month they could get their hands on. Which, by the way, all turned out terribly. Because they decided to take more stuff that wasn't in their age range. As bad as One Piece was, and as much as people got angry, it drew a lot of money and a lot of viewers. So they decided, you know what? All anime is on the table. Let's just get our hands on whatever we can. And yeah, we can do as many changes as we want, but it's for kids. Now, this made sense when they were doing stuff that was originally intended for kids, and, well, maybe sometimes older kids, but still kids nonetheless. But now they were doing stuff that was meant for either all ages or not kids at all. And that's the problem, is they started seeing cartoons as just for kids. And they decided to get overly strict. Like, even stuff on the FoxBox that went past completely unedited would get edited either like their standards would change for a new show, or they would very rarely go back and actually alter some stuff. It's very rare to find that, but there is some evidence that I've heard about. But like going back on a couple scenes in Sonic that might have been a little violent and then altering them a little bit, stuff like that. It's very subtle, but it's there. And ultimately 4Kids was getting very, very, very hurt because of this. They kept grabbing on to whatever they could. They kept grabbing onto whatever they thought could make them successful, and then butchering it, and then releasing it, and then getting surprised when it didn't work. So whenever these shows kept dropping, they just kept relying on more Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin-offs and more Sonic X reruns. And this killed them. This killed them. Because in 2006, they lost a bidding war for Yu-Gi-Oh! They no longer had the dubbing rights to Pokemon. So yeah, they lost the rights to Pokemon in a bidding war. And which is funny because people hate 4Kids, but now people say that the anime was better with them. Funny how that works out, right? But Yu-Gi-Oh! They were starting to lose it there because, well, things were starting to get shaky for them. The other people wanted Yu-Gi-Oh! And they barely had enough money to hang on to their already existing properties. So, they didn't have enough money to carry on. So Fox decided not to renew their Saturday morning contract. Yeah, so much for FoxBox being there forever. Not only did it get overhauled into 4Kids, but 4Kids eventually did go off the air. But that's not the end of the story. Oh, no. For some, they would consider that a happy ending for 4Kids. They kind of got what was coming to them by going way too far in the censorship and way too far in the Americanization, because perhaps I forgot to mention. So, like I said, the early stuff was just kind of cultural differences. Stuff that other shows, kind of like The Office and stuff, when they come over to America, they have to change a lot of stuff culturally. You know, before they start doing their own thing entirely. But 4Kids went too far. They went too far. They decided to make them more America and had them do things like sing the national anthem and very off-key, poor singing, and trying to remove all hints of Japanese stuff. Early on, it was still pretty reminiscent of just kind of either it was in Japan or it was in a far-off magical world, or it was just kind of ambiguous, like Sonic X in a sense, although it did say it was America, but still, yeah, it's not important. But they went way too far. And the newer stuff that they made, they went way too far. I have a feeling they might know that, but who knows. But 4Kids was not dead. No, they may have died on Fox, but they were still going for their backup plan. Fox's arch rival when it came to the Saturday mornings, Kids WB, was dead. It died. Fewer and fewer people watched it, and not a lot of people stuck around. So, they decided to say, hey, 4Kids, you guys don't have a home anymore? How about you come go with us? And then they did. And then they did not learn from their lesson at all, and maybe, in fact, got even worse. Because now they tried to rush all the shows that weren't Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Sonic out the door. Like TMNT. Now I've actually seen it. Even though I didn't grow up with anything Ninja Turtles related, I can actually say that now, having seen it, that show is really good. It's deep, it's got some good humor, it's got some good action, it's got a really actually interesting storyline. And from what I've heard from the fans of the original, the Turtles were a bit more developed, like Raphael getting a little bit more of a personality, and the personality that a lot of people know him for today. Stuff like that, and it was a big hit, but now they just decide to sweep it under the rug and make it nothing. I didn't grow up with the show, really, but now that I've seen it, I can say that it is actually really good. It had a good storyline, had good animation, had good characterization. From what I've heard, it even improved on some of the characteristics of the original. It had a good storyline. What wasn't to like? But they just decided they wanted no more of that, and then after the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fast Forward thing failed, they begrudgingly decided to do that one with the Turtles Forever, and then just kind of get the show gone so that they could focus on more anime. That's all they really wanted now. No more original shows, no more stuff that actually cared about quality, no more dubs that actually tried to make sure that they stayed good with the original. No, this was done now. They were done with that. So even the stuff that was hit or miss was all gone. They just decided to get their hands on whatever they could and just kind of churn out a very cheap, bad version of it. And now this was starting to hurt them because more and more dubs were making it over to America. So it wasn't just 4Kids being a really big one over there and then Toonami having some. No, now there were multiple licenses coming out, not just one exclusive thing. And now there were also a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah, so people were starting to actually see the better stuff and the real stuff, and it was hurting. It really was, and well, they decided to get even more desperate, so now their complete focus on anime dubs, Toonzai, came out, but this is also another turning point where they thought, hey, you know, kids are stupid. Because now they decided to really pander to kids, and now anything that they had that was trying to get creative was just kind of down the hill. Toonzai was very clearly all anime. Like, that's kind of the whole point of it. That's kind of the mascot stuff being all Japan themed and all. It just really was desperate, and all the writing they had in the interstitials was desperate. 4Kids was just kind of generic bumpers. Toonzai had these couple characters that were just derping around, and they were doing really bad jokes and stuff because they thought, hey, kids like bad jokes because kids are dumb and we don't really need to do anything. Yeah, that didn't help. But what also didn't help was the fact that a lot of the people that had licenses with them wanted to stop doing business with them, and all the people who were being courted by them said no. So they were running out of stuff, so what they decided to do? More Sonic X, more Yu-Gi-Oh!, Dragon Ball. Oh no! This was the nail in the coffin for 4Kids. This was the one that did them in. So like one of the only ones that was able to get licensed by them was Dragon Ball Z Kai. I haven't watched Dragon Ball other than this, but even I can tell you this isn't Dragon Ball. No, 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 no. Now, to be fair, they didn't dub this. This was not a 4Kids dub. But that didn't stop 4Kids from contacting people like Sean Shamil and trying to get them to redub dialogue so that it'd be more suitable for their new standards. Which is funny, because looking at the stuff that they censored, which was still in English, in the FoxBox era, that would have been okay. That would have been fine if they released it like that. But they went overboard with stuff. Not just stuff that they would have found bad back in the day, but stuff that they randomly find bad now. And it's not even really that bad. It's just stuff that ultra sheltered people would find bad. And sure, maybe there would be some kids that wouldn't like some of the stuff that was in there, but still, they just oversimplified and just made it really, really bad. And all these edits were extremely obvious because there was an already existing version of the dub out there. And the thing is, people had access to it. This is when the mass public was realizing what 4Kids was doing to this extent. They always had kind of a little feeling that they were editing it. In the 4Kids era, they kind of knew, but this was the nail in the coffin. This killed them. People finally knew to the extent they would go to make sure that all of it was just neutered. So yeah, if this doesn't prove that FoxBox and Toonzai are entirely different entities, take a look here. Because back then, like I said, they weren't that bad. Up until 2005 or so, they weren't that bad, except for One Piece. But again, that wasn't really what they wanted. But then starting with 2005, once FoxBox unplugged and became 4Kids TV, that's when things got bad. Even though I still loved it and watched it as a kid, I'm not afraid to call out 4Kids TV as being just a bunch of corporate people that only care about the long-term profit. And by long-term, I actually mean short-term. Because this is a little thing that they did. They said that they claimed, or that they said that they cared about the long-term profit and all that, but they don't. They just care about what'll make them money here and now. But there's a reason for that, because they were in big financial trouble, huge financial trouble. Ever since they came back onto the CW, now being named the CW for kids, and now Toonzai, they were just scraping the bottom of the barrel to find maybe a penny or a quarter to help get them by. They were laying off a whole bunch of staff, and they were doing shady backdoor deals with it when it came to licensing with the Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, which got their Yu-Gi-Oh thing taken away. Now they lost Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, their two biggest ones. All they had was Sonic X. That was it. But that wasn't the end. No, more happened. They went bankrupt in 2012. They just completely went under. Toonzai was done. They took it off the air. And they had to, in order to save themselves from Chapter 11 bankruptcy, they had to sell off all of their assets. All of them, except for one. Dinosaur King. Isn't that ironic that the one that kind of hurt them, by proxy, is the only one that they still own today? Because yes, they're actually still around. I'll get to that, but ultimately they lost everything except for Dinosaur King. Now, it's complicated as to what happened. The 4 Acquisition Group, which is not 4Kids, got a hold of their actors and the Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, while Saban Entertainment, owners of the Power Rangers, got a hold of a lot of their TV show license, including their network spot. So they got a hold of Toonzai and put it back on the air, but it wasn't Toonzai, it was Vortexx. So, contrary to popular belief, Vortexx is not the last incarnation of 4Kids TV. That is Toonzai. Toonzai is actually the last incarnation because Vortexx, despite having most of the same shows, was not run at all by 4Kids. 4Kids wasn't allowed to interfere with it at all. Not a little teeny tiny bit. And how did Vortexx turn out? Wonderfully mediocre. Absolutely mediocre. Completely unremarkable in any single way. Has nothing distinguishing about it. Nothing worth remembering. It's just there. Yeah. I'm sorry to say that, but a lot of people were looking back on Vortexx saying, oh, it was wonderful. It was good, back to the FoxBox days when they actually kind of cared. But no, it's boring. For one, the interstitials are just kind of lame and cheap. It's on par with the early Nickelodeon 2009 bumpers back before they found their niche and back before they found their creativity and stuff. It's just kind of there. But it's not just the promos and bumpers, it's still other things like the fact that Sonic X and Yu-Gi-Oh! Still ruled the night. No matter what, they would always eat up time slots, 2, maybe 3, and they barely left any room for other shows, which, speaking of other shows, they did something really weird in getting other acquired programming and cartoons that had nothing to do with their lineup, like Tiny Toons for some reason. I mean, I liked seeing it on there, but it was just weird. And then there was also the fact that no new animation stuff happened. Saban could have just started anew. Maybe that could have helped it keep going, but no. They just decided that to keep it going, keep the status quo going, because that's what people liked, right? But what they did decide to do was actually nice. They brought back some of the old shows like Cubix Robots for Everyone and Cubix Robots for Everyone. Okay, so yeah, they only just kind of aired that one. But really, they could have done more, but they were planning on doing more. They were planning on actually stepping up their game. The whole boring stuff that they were doing, the just kind of schedule stuff, was just kind of picking up from the status quo. They were going to start implementing more old shows. Who knows? We might have had a revitalized FoxBox era, but there's a problem. They went out of business. Not Saban. Saban's still around, but the Vortexx part. You know why? Saturday morning cartoons were a thing of the past. Because think about it. Would you rather watch Cartoon Network that's 24 hours a day, basically, and with shows that you could always catch and that you know the quality of, or waking up early on Saturday mornings to watch a bunch of Sonic X and Yu-Gi-Oh! And maybe a classic show here and there? Yeah, I'd stick with Cartoon Network too. It's sad to see such a nice piece of history going away in the wind like that, but really, it was kind of unavoidable. So, how did Vortexx celebrate the ending of an era? Nothing! They did nothing to celebrate it. And this is what gets me angry. So, you see, here's the thing about it. This was the end of two eras. Two eras. The 4Kids era and the Saturday morning cartoon era. And I watched the entire broadcast from beginning to end of Vortexx on the last day it had, which was September of 2014. I still have the final hour of Sonic X and Yu-Gi-Oh! Saved onto my DVR just to kind of relive it a little bit here and there. So, yeah, they did nothing to celebrate it. In fact, right when the Yu-Gi-Oh! Credits ended, it was just normal programming again, or normal broadcast. They did nothing to celebrate the fact that it was Saturday morning cartoons, nothing to celebrate the 4Kids legacy, nothing to tell the people they wouldn't be back next week. They did nothing. If I was a kid watching this, I would have been so confused because it just would have been like, oh, yep, no, it's just the ending of another Vortexx block. Time to tune in next week to see more of my favorite stuff. But no, they didn't even tell you it was gone. So then you would have just woken up one morning if you didn't know, thanks to all the internet stuff, if you just wandered down on the TV and then turned it on and it was just like, oh, one magnificent morning. And that didn't last really either as far as I know. And people didn't like that. But oh no, Vortexx is gone. Thanks for telling me, guys. I know you don't want the kids to get upset or worried, but to be honest, who was watching you? But in all seriousness, that was just a terrible way to end it. It's just so anticlimactic. It's going out with a poof. It doesn't do anything. It's not going out with a bang. It's just a little teeny little droplet. It's just so annoying because think of all the things they could have done. They still had all the voice actors with them. Well, not Saban, but they were really, really good off with the company that did own them, and they were still doing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Stuff. So they could have maybe dubbed over some Yu-Gi-Oh! Footage or some Sonic footage. With having the characters giving a little bit of a farewell or saying, thanks for watching, guys. We really appreciate you guys giving us all this attention for the past 12 years. Thank you very much. Because we wouldn't have gotten anywhere without you. Yeah, and then they didn't do anything. They didn't even try. They didn't even give a little text screen that would have been like 30 seconds to make in Movie Maker or anything. I know it's weird to get so worked up over, but it shows you how little Vortexx really was invested in itself, to the point where it couldn't even tell you that it was going away because it would make no impact. That's sad, and it's a real sad way to end what could have been a revival for a failing brand, and a sad end to what started off so promising and started off so invested, and then just shows you what happens when corporations get too greedy and too corporate and lose track of what made them special in the first place. Although for 4Kids, it happened earlier than expected, and way earlier than most. Because hey, at least Nickelodeon waited till 2006. And at least Cartoon Network waited to 2013, right? But 4Kids isn't dead. Well, technically it is. The name 4Kids is gone forever because, you know, the whole anime thing was really not doing well for them, and the whole bankruptcy thing just kind of did them in. So now they are currently 4 Licensing Group, which is a terrible name unless they're just named 4, but it removes the pun, 4Kids. And now it's 4 Licensing. It's a company that's 4 licensing. Okay. Really, the only thing that they've ever licensed that ever gained notoriety was Isoblocks, which is kind of a sports technology that shielded your head somehow, but it never caught on. Very, very few sold. And they tried to promote them in the major leagues and stuff, and it never really worked. And other than that, they just got like a little bit of cheap gadgets here and there, and it never received any sort of notoriety or popularity. And in fact, as of right now, they're going through bankruptcy again. However, this is likely to be the last time because they have no more assets to sell off, except for Dinosaur King. But it's not like someone's going to pay $1 million for Dinosaur King, because that's all they own now. Isoblocks, Dinosaur King, and a couple other miscellaneous gadgets here and there. So yeah, and they've already had to lay off so many people when they were 4Kids and Toonzai, but now that they're 4 Licensing Group, they are at death's door. There is no saving them. Unless some magical billionaire guardian angel comes down from the heavens and scoops them up into their rich, rich arms, and then saves them from corporate destruction, which is pretty much impossible to happen. They are going to be done, and it's going to be kind of a sad end. Yeah, it's kind of cathartic because, you know, they got all arrogant, they got all greedy, they lost all their creativity, but there's still people that need jobs. Entertainment was clearly not their true field. I mean, think about it. It worked for like 3 or 4 years, but then they decided to just focus on the short-term goal and then the long-term, super, super rich goal. In other words, throwing random stuff at the wall, hoping it's the next Sonic X, and then getting out like a bandit on it all because it's such a big hit and you get all that money. Their DVD sales dwindled eventually too, and then they lost all the rights to that. Now there's a lot of shows that are out of print and you can't find them anymore. But it's just, again, really sad because, like I said, they had promised, but then they just squandered it. I'm repeating myself now because it's a very important point, and it's a lot of roads that companies are going down right now. There's a lot of TV networks that are kind of doing the same thing, just caring more about the corporate stuff, shilling more shows than others, and just trying to do whatever they can to make money. While the censoring and butchering stuff isn't there because, like, you know, Toonami's doing well, and they're not really censoring anything, if anything at all. They're kind of going down a similar path, whether they actually want to admit it or not. And it's probably not as severe, but they need to be careful. But this is kind of a cautionary tale. If you're gonna be an anime dub company, do your job right. And if you are going to censor it and edit it, do it in ways that make sense, like what they did early on. But don't try to Murica it up. Don't try to just remove stuff for the sake of removing stuff. Do what they did earlier if you're gonna remove anything at all. Just think about what the target audience wants. And also, if you're gonna get a package deal, make sure that there's shows that go hand in hand, because I'm pretty sure Dinosaur King goes for a little bit broader of an age range than One Piece. So, ladies and gentlemen, and echidnas, I guess, this has been my TV talks on 4Kids. and, well, all of its subsidiaries and all of its brands and stuff. As a brief recap for each incarnation, FoxBox, really, really good. It had a couple bad shows here and there, but they tried. They had a lot of creativity going for it. They really liked to engage the viewer. The people behind it were genuinely excited and happy to be there. And yeah, even though the edits were a little bad sometimes, it was still good as a whole. 4Kids, really corporate, really corporate. They didn't care about a lot of the stuff. Basically became the Sonic X network. Toonzai, the worst of the incarnations because it's exactly what people remember 4Kids as. Just being a bunch of really cheap, really lame dubs that nobody would ever remember in the coming years except for its terribleness. Vortexx, just flat and boring. Nothing that stood out about it, nothing to make it linger, and one wonders how that became the last Saturday morning cartoon. So folks, thank you very much for watching, and I hope this has shed some more light. Because even though 4Kids is still technically a bad company, they still had some brains, like the whole One Piece thing especially. I really hope people understand the story behind that, because that is a very important story in understanding 4Kids. It's not like they directly went to go out and do that, but they had no choice. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they did later on that was irredeemable and completely unacceptable. There's just remember where the border is. Remember the line between the two. And then hopefully you will live in happiness too. Like 4Kids and 4 licensing don't. Okay, so I'll see you guys next time. Good night, everybody.